Welcome to today's e-workshop, Managing Low Mood and Motivation and Supporting Positive Mindset While Working Remotely. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yusra Benjeloun, Administrative Coordinator and Project Manager with the Work Wellness Institute, and I'll be moderating this e-workshop session. This online workshop is made possible through the support of the Community Gaming Grant Program through the BC government, as well as donations and memberships to WWI. We thank our program partners, Education Advisory Committee, and speakers who contribute to this webinar series. We would also like to thank our 9 founding partner organizations in the Harnessing Talent project, as well as our academic team. Harnessing Talent Alliance for Recruiting and Retaining Canadians with Disabilities and Mental Health Challenges is a 3-year project funded by Employment and Social Development Canada. If you would like to learn more, please visit our website at harnessingtalentalliance.ca. While we're waiting for others to join us, I'll go over a few technical points for the e-workshop. You should be able to hear the presentation through your computer speakers or through the conference call line if you dialed in. Please use the question box to submit any issues you may be experiencing, any comments you may have, and to ask any questions related to the workshop. We will collect questions submitted throughout the workshop and follow it with a Q&A based on the questions submitted. Please note that you will be asked to participate in this e-workshop by answering poll questions, and that you will be invited to answer an open question at the end of the presentation through our question box. Your interactions will be completely anonymous. Your name will not be shared with the rest of our audience nor our speakers. The Work Wellness Institute is recognized by the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, to offer professional development credits, PDCs. This program is valid for 1 PDC for the SHRM CP or SHRM SCP. Our institute also offers accreditation recognized by the Vocational Rehabilitation Association, VRA Canada. If you are a WWI member or a VRA Canada member, you receive free certificates of attendance. Otherwise, there is a $15 administration fee. We're very excited to welcome Nina Hornjatkevyc and Aaron Telnes from Synthesis Psychology in Calgary. Nina is the practice lead at Synthesis Psychology and Calgary Career Counseling. For over a decade, she has provided personal and career counseling support as a registered psychologist. It has been her honor to work with thousands of clients individually. Nina is also a sought-after speaker, regularly presenting to organizations at conferences and contributing to media on mental health and career development topics. Nina is committed to clients' goals and enjoys collaborating with them to explore their unique circumstances, strengths, and needs, and supporting their personal, educational, and professional lives. Nina works with clients from strengths-based and practical perspectives, using research-supported strategies, assessments, and resources that help clients develop fulfilling careers. Her areas of specialty for personal counseling include managing life transitions, anxiety, grief and loss, and supporting self-esteem. Nina completed a Master of Science degree in Counseling Psychology at the University of Calgary. Her master's thesis research explored grief and loss experiences and received the Canadian Psychological Association Section Award. Nina also completed Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Education degrees at the University of Alberta with a focus on music and psychology. Nina is a registered psychologist with the College of Alberta Psychologists, as well as a member of the Psychologists Association of Alberta. Aaron is experienced in the development, implementation, interpretation, and presentation of projects and applied research assessments, as well as evaluating the effectiveness of programs, interventions, and individuals. Throughout his career, Aaron has sought to improve programs and performance by effecting change at the individual and organizational levels. Aaron is adept at conflict management and resolution to foster increased understanding, stronger relationships, and clearer objectives. In his work with individuals and organizations, Aaron adopts a creative, collaborative, and solution-focused mindset to achieve desired results. Aaron enjoys supporting individuals, teams, and organizations in navigating and optimizing the effectiveness of distributed work and teams. Aaron is a registered psychologist with the College of Alberta Psychologists and a member of the Psychologists Association of Alberta. He works in the fields of industrial, organizational, and clinical Counseling Psychology with Leadership Success Group, Work Evolution, Calgary Career Counseling, and Synthesis Psychology, helping organizations and individuals achieve optimal functioning, productivity, and engagement. Aaron holds a Master of Counseling degree from the University of Calgary, where he received the Canadian Institute of Health Research Scholarship for his research evaluating the effectiveness, accessibility, and cost-effectiveness of an organizational mental health model. His undergraduate degree also comes from the University of Calgary, where he received a Bachelor of Arts with a major in psychology, during which time he designed, implemented, interpreted, and presented a research study investigation the effectiveness of a short-term problem-solving intervention on performance anxiety. Nina and Aaron, thank you so much for making the time to be with us during these busy and uncertain times. I will hand it over to you without further wait.
Thank you very much, Yusra. That was a wonderful, wonderful introduction. And with that said, I will quickly pass it over to my colleague, Nina, and she will get us underway.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So in the work that Aaron and I do at Synthesis Psychology, we specialize in personal counseling and in career-related psychology, and we've certainly seen the effects of COVID on mood, motivation, both in people's personal and in people's work lives. So we're thrilled to be presenting this information, and we've prepared a lot of information and strategies for you. We want to give you lots of options and lots of useful things to take away from today. And so we want to start with a poll. We're hoping that what we're going to be emphasizing is going to be particularly useful to you. So to start with the poll, if you could take a look and to give us information, would you identify yourself as primarily someone who is a professional who's dealing with people who are struggling, and you're looking for information and strategies to support people in your teams and to support people in your organization? Would you say that you're primarily potentially looking for strategies for yourself, and that's what motivated signing up? Or would you say that it's more of a combination of both of those things, where you're hoping to be able to support others and you're also hoping to be able to support yourself? And so we'll give you a few moments to be able to answer the poll so that we can really tailor what we cover and emphasize, particularly in the examples, to make sure that this is particularly relevant to you. Okay. So thank you, Yusra. So it looks like it is in fact a combination that's the most frequently chosen. So looking both for information for other people and then also for ourselves, and that some of you are looking more so for either one of those. So we'll definitely cover both, because we want to make sure that what we're talking about is the most useful to you. And to get into what we're going to be talking about with the agenda. So we will cover a range of things, and we want to give you some background information because it's helpful to know the why in addition to the how. And so we'll talk about some of what the data is saying and some of what we're seeing. We'll also talk about, well, some key things to know about motivation and mood and productivity, and then we'll launch into strategies. So to start off, we're going to get into what the data is telling us. So this information is going to be based in part on information from the Angus Reid Institute, and then also about some of what we're seeing. So based on a recent study from the Angus Reid Institute, they found that the respondents indicated that about half of Canadians are saying that COVID has significantly impacted their mental health, and some to quite a large extent. And so this actually really reflects what we've been seeing for about the last 2.5 months at our synthesis psychology practices, and then also the other practices that we work with. And something that we found is that, of course, worry has been happening all the way through. And anxiety was what people started with primarily, but over time, we've seen an increase in people talking about the cumulative effects, lower mood, people are tired, people have been experiencing some of the effects for a longer period of time. And so what we know around in terms of stress and the way people are impacted by stress is that short bursts of stress can actually be useful. This is what our stress response has actually been designed for and built for, and why it can be very adaptive. But when it comes to longer term periods of stress, so if stress lasts, let's say, weeks to months to years potentially, in some circumstances, then that's when stress can become chronic stress, and the effects can be more damaging. So effects on our thoughts, effects on our emotions, and we do become potentially more susceptible to mental illness developing. And so this is some of what we've started to see with the longer period of COVID continuing. And some of the typically protective factors that help people to manage the effects of stress, things like a meaningful job, meaningful social connections, having access to social connections, and feeling like people have a mastery over their challenges. These are some of the things that COVID has also affected. And so Erin is going to cover some foundational information about mood, motivation, and productivity to help with giving some key foundational knowledge pieces to help to support you, to support yourselves, and to support those that you're helping out.
Awesome, thank you, Nina. And so I'll take the mic now for a second here. And as my colleague described, I'm really going to talk about or give a brief description of some theories and concepts related to mood, motivation, and productivity, so we can take that information and really kind of integrate it well into our strategies later on in the presentation. So with that said, when we jump into our first slide around this, we want to look at the difference between sadness and depression, right? So sadness is usually it's related to a specific or certain situation or event, right? It's very, very niche and very, very narrow in terms of its impact and trigger. Whereas depression, it presents without any clear triggers. So a person who experiences depression tends to feel sad or hopeless about most or everything, right? So sadness is specific, depression is broad without any clear triggers. So this is an important differentiation, right? Especially as we go into and are in the midst of this COVID pandemic, right? Understanding, am I feeling sad or am I feeling depressed based on what these definitions are telling us? So when we move ahead, I want to talk a bit about a term that I came across and that has been floated around recently, known as quarantine fatigue. So this is typically what they're discovering is happening to individuals in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's the strain, the restlessness, and frustration of continued isolation due to COVID-19 and the increased dismissal of stay-at-home orders from governmental authorities. So people have two different responses, or two broad responses to this ongoing quarantine. So they're either experiencing depression and staying in, right, feeling very unmotivated, loss of energy and inability to kind of act and engage in their life, or they're experiencing frustration and going out. They're just getting tired of it, and they're just seeking kind of more social engagement, because at the end of the day, we are all highly, highly social creatures. We are socially wired, and that limitation on social engagement really puts a strain on us. So some other things to highlight is that quarantine fatigue can be exacerbated or worsened by the following, right? So low rates of physical activity, right? So a lot of us have transitioned to this working from home situation, which even if we simply just remove our commute time, right? That's a little bit of physical activity in certain situations, right? That's gone now, right? So same with changes in family dynamics. The parents are home as well as the kids in often cases, right? Lack of social connection, which I already spoke to. That financial hardship, right? Individuals may have been experiencing a reduction in their working hours, their contracts might have shifted, or they may have been laid off, which increases that financial hardship. And then obviously just work-related stress and managing that transition from working from home now. So moving along, I want to talk about a few different theories related to motivation. There are so many out there, we couldn't cover them all in an hour today, so I'm just going to touch on a few key elements of a few that you see here. So McClelland's theory, it describes that we possess 3 motivating drivers: achievement, affiliation, and power. So one driver is often our dominant driver that is influenced by our culture and life experiences. So achievement, that's related to this drive to accomplish goals. Affiliation, belonging to the group, right? That social pull. And power, control and influence of others. And then when we talk further about Skinner's reinforcement theory, this is all about an individual, describing how an individual's behavior is impacted by rewards, consequences, and the feedback they receive from their environment, right? So creating ultimately a motivation feedback loop of increased or decreased action. So for instance, reward for positive behavior increases positive behaviors. Punishment for negative behaviors decreases negative behaviors. And no reward or punishment leads to the behavior disappearing altogether, whether it's good or bad. So when we move further, we see Room's theory discusses behavior results from conscious choices, right, between alternatives with goals, and the goal is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. So he based his theory on 3 factors: expectancy, instrumentality, and valence. So in a nutshell, expectancy results in, what it indicates is increased effort equals increased performance. Instrumentality leads to better performance equals desired outcomes. And valence, perceived value outcome, is what an individual is looking for. So if those things line up and those equations are met, then a person is ultimately going to feel motivated, going to feel engaged, and feel positive, right? And so finally, when we talk briefly about Locke's goal setting theory, this is all about setting specific difficult goals that, and this might seem confusing, but it is all about simple or specific, simple, and difficult goals. That's what boosts behavior. And Locke's theory is really lined up with that SMART analogy. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So that is where goal setting really helps promote motivation. So moving along, I want to talk a bit more about productivity and remote work during COVID-19. So when we look here, what we're understanding is that optimal employee engagement occurs when employees spend 60 to 80% of their time working off-site or remote. So what stats are telling us is that remote work actually leads to greater employee engagement. Remote workers are 20 to 25% more productive than their on-site counterparts. And 85% of businesses say that implementing flexible work has made their company more productive. So throughout the midst of this COVID-19 situation in the pandemic, we've kind of had to have forced into a crash course on remote work and remote productivity on a broad scale. And yet, once this Band-Aid's been ripped off, what we're seeing in the statistics is that it's actually a good option. It's just going to take a bit of time to become comfortable with it and integrate. So now this brings us to our second poll. So if you can, answer the following question. So going forward, how much flexible remote work do you want to integrate into your own work arrangements moving forward? All right, so hopefully everyone had a chance to answer that question. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Nina again here.
Yeah, really, really interesting to see that with integrating remote work arrangements, that there's quite a range there, and that none of the people who are participating today identified that they don't want any remote work arrangements. So very, very interesting that that having either some or even a significant proportion, but the majority of you saying about half and half would be really welcome. And of course, it's going to depend on the industry you're in. Of course, it's going to depend on the setting and what's possible. But given that there's this this awareness that having that kind of flexibility, that there are some benefits to that, and some of it's quite welcome. That's going to be interesting to see how this continues to evolve. And so in terms of thinking of strategies, I'm sure this is why most of you are here, to talk about what are ways to support our mood, to support our productivity, and not only our own, but also the people who you're working alongside and working to help out. And because a lot's been changing and we've been pivoting and a lot's been evolving, there's a lot of benefit to having a range of strategies to look at. And like Erin talked about, with different motivation factors and different motivation theories, a lot of different things will fit for different people. So it's really helpful to have like a toolkit, and that's really the kind of approach that we took to putting together this information, is to present a real range of options to choose from. So in terms of looking at what can be useful, looking at supporting mood and supporting happiness is something that we wanted to get into. So when it might seem, I don't know, quite a contrast to jump right into this as a contrast, let's say, to low mood, but when thinking about happiness, the fact is that a lot of factors will influence mood. And so we wanted to start with a polling question to help to identify what are some of the factors that you think influence mood. Do you think it's more nature, or do you think it's more nurture? So on the nature side, what proportion of people's happiness it can be attributed to genetic factors? So here the research was looking at, just while you're answering the question, I'll tell you a bit of background. So research looked at, when looking at two different people's levels of happiness, what proportion of that difference between two people's levels of happiness could be attributed to genetic factors. And so this gives you a chance to think about that. You know, let's say when you're talking about one person versus another person, and depending on how happy they rated themselves, what proportion do you think could be attributed to genetic factors? Okay. So here there's a range also, right? So there's an awareness clearly that some of happiness ratings and happiness levels do have to do with internal factors that come built in to us. So in terms of what research found, the results actually of research indicated that it's actually roughly about 50% of people's happiness can be attributed to genetic factors. So yeah, about 50% to the genetic side. So in terms of who we come from and what we're born with, about 10% can be attributed to external, let's say, life circumstances, where people live, economic conditions, access to school, social environment, health status. So sometimes people are a bit surprised that that's not a higher percentage, and of course the number can increase in more pronounced or extreme circumstances, but that would be, let's say, like a typical range, let's say, would be around 10%. And then, in a lot of ways, the good news is that behavior accounts for about 40%. So we can influence quite a bit of happiness. And a lot of this, of course, has to do with skills, activities, behaviors, things we can do. And of course, all of these are approximations because there are a lot of individual differences. So this had to do with aggregate results in terms of combining a lot of people's experiences together to derive these kinds of results. But there's a lot that we can do to influence our mood and our happiness levels. So on the next slide, in terms of happiness habits, a lot of what helps is, let's say, putting practices into place on a daily, weekly, routine kind of basis. Now, somehow people understand that that things have to be practiced when people talk about, like, let's say, their physical health. You know, like when thinking about exercise, people don't expect to, I don't know, to get the six-pack from working out once or implementing a particular strategy one time. But when it comes to developing happiness, whether it be in the workplace, whether it be in our personal lives, it's also really, really important to give ourselves a chance to develop those kinds of habits through training and through practice. So implementing a range of activities really helps, and implementing them often. Really, really makes a difference. So in terms of what we can do, getting into integrating happiness habits in our remote workplaces. And now workplaces, I mean, of course, thinking of, let's say, in our work lives. So a few here. So gratitude. Gratitude is an excellent strategy. A ton of research support. And so here's an example of something that can really help to make a concrete difference in terms of happiness levels. So if people can identify what they're most thankful for and what really means a lot to them, for example, a research study found that if people recorded 3 things that went well for them in a day, not just what they got done, but what went well across 6 weeks, and they did this daily, that their happiness levels increased. And by the way, productivity also does increase. So if people can identify what they're particularly grateful for and what's going well for them regularly, then they're likely to see an increase in that self-reported level of happiness. Now, savoring gets into thinking about positive experiences, whether they're past experiences, present experiences, or things that we hope will happen in the future. That's what savoring gets at. So if people can write about, let's say some of what they are particularly proud of, and also some of the things they're looking forward to, and acknowledge some of these things, positive emotions, actually social connection and connection to meaning, and feeling a meaning in one's work life, all increase. So some examples of this, it could be getting people to reflect on what's an achievement the team's most proud of in terms of something that's happened in the last week or since COVID started. What are people looking most forward to once COVID's done? And getting to reflect on some of these things, both individually and then also with other people. Kindness. Kindness has to do with supporting and promoting the happiness of other people. And so one of the things about being kind is that it tends to lead to a greater boost in happiness for ourselves also. And so some examples of this that a lot of people are doing have to do with, let's say, community support projects, writing letters of appreciation, the 7 p.m. being super loud and noisy in appreciation of what people on the front lines are doing, and doing shout outs internally, and acknowledging work that's done really well. All of these things can contribute significantly to our own happiness and then also obviously the happiness and appreciation of others. Optimism. So optimism here doesn't mean necessarily unrealistic optimism, like rainbows and unicorns optimism. It's about also supporting realistic, or primarily supporting realistic optimism. So, and what are ways to do this? Because oftentimes when the weight of some of what's been happening starts to bear down on us, it's helpful to think of, let's say, what are goals we want to achieve and what are ways that we want to get there. So if you can identify, let's say, what are things that have been working, and then what do we want to move forward, and what are strategies we can use to support more of those positives happening. If those can be identified, and if those can be specifically identified, then it's more likely that we'll feel like we have the wherewithal and have the mood and motivation factors operating for us to help those things be achieved. So when thinking about some of those, I want to get into the next polling question in terms of getting an opportunity to, when you think about happiness habits for yourself, and when it could be for you personally, or it could be in terms of supporting your organization, which of those happiness habits would you most want to improve and further develop? Because some people are doing some of these more so than others. And so it's helpful to get a chance to reflect on, okay, what am I doing, and what would I want to continue doing, or what would I want to integrate more so, both for myself, to support myself, and then potentially also to support, let's say, the workplace, to support other people that I'm around and that I can influence. Okay, so interesting to see here that savoring comes up as something that people would like to increase more so. Yeah. And all of them, of course, have a really important role to play. Now, in terms of additional things that can help to propel us to support our mood and to support also resiliency, because this isn't only about supporting mood, let's say in the short term, but also helping us over the extended period of time that COVID might continue to have some effects. So supporting, let's say, each other through support networks and team development. So this is about having opportunities to connect with each other in positive and collegial ways, let's say. So this could be, for example, getting a chance to have these kinds of daily huddles that I know we're having, for example, in our workplace. It's not that a daily huddle with everyone is necessary in all circumstances. Sometimes it's a weekly huddle, depending on the nature of your connection with people. But getting to connect, having those touch points goes a long way. So I know, for example, with our admin team, we do have a daily huddle. And in a lot of ways, it helps with the collective brain power too, because people have a lot on their minds. So it really, really helps with thinking about, okay, so each person gets to go around quickly and say, okay, these are my P1s, my priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 for the day. And then if there's support that people can provide, then we can exchange ideas on how to do that. And getting to connect with people in other ways. I know we're using MS Teams to message each other on keeping up to date. And so some of these kinds of ways of connecting go a long way, and even in personal lives, obviously connecting with people who, let's say family members or friends, and being able to see how people are doing and extending that kind of a connection really, really helps to support happiness and self-care. So self-care, of course, gets talked about. We know self-care is important. We certainly hear about it. It's another thing to actually integrate it, especially when there's a lot that people are trying to manage. So on the next slide, there are some ideas to help us, because of course it's that idea of putting the mask on first. In a lot of it's an interesting time to use the mask analogy, but putting the protective mask on ourselves so that we can also help to protect and support others. So the foundational basics, supporting our physical health. There is no difference between physical health ultimately and mental health and psychological health. We are integrated systems. So if we can support our physical well-being by eating nutritious food and getting some activity, and potentially even going on responsibly distant walking meetings, even if we're not physically in the same space. There are ways to help to support our physical well-being, and that definitely helps to support mood and productivity, and getting rest also is very, very important. And also helping to support our thoughts. So things like acceptance. So everything from accepting that this is how things are right now. It doesn't mean we have to be resigned to that. It doesn't mean we have to like it. We can be plenty frustrated. But if we can accept elements of it, then there's more mental energy, basically, and emotional energy that opens up to be able to process other things and being able to use those resources for making really solid decisions and supporting ourselves to be as productive as we can be. And also having reasonable expectations of ourselves and of others goes a long way. I know sometimes it's easier said than done, but it's important because people are thinking through a lot and are going through a lot. Adapting, seeing opportunities for growth through these challenges and getting to acknowledge some of those. What are some things that, like we were talking about, some things we're proud of, both about ourselves and our responses, but then also in terms of what we're seeing other people doing, and also looking for silver linings. Things like adjusting our lives for the common good, and knowing that there are some shared experiences in this, and so there are some benefits to getting to acknowledge that. And so I'm going to now pass things over back to Erin to talk about additional strategies in terms of promoting motivation and productivity.
Awesome, thank you, Nina. So as Nina described, I'm going to spend the last little bit of our presentation today discussing some strategies that can hopefully help individuals with increasing their motivation as well as improving upon their productivity. So one of the first concepts I want to talk about, it's actually pulled from an old Mark Twain quote. So eat a live frog first thing in the morning, and nothing worse will happen to you the rest of the day. So this was actually pulled from a motivational speaker by the name of Brian Tracy. And really at the core of it, it's just saying take the opportunity to complete the most challenging tasks in your day first, right? Then the remaining tasks will seem less arduous. So it's really all about organize and rank those tasks into a set, say 6 important tasks down for your day, and really start to rank them most challenging to least challenging, and then ultimately complete the most challenging task first, then the second most challenging, and so on until completion. And so the reason behind this is that obviously at the most challenging task is not only going to be potentially lower in terms of your motivation to do it because it's more challenging, but also it's going to take up more energy. So you really want to spend your energy at the front end so that as your energy drains or you expend your energy throughout your day, you're only required to use a lesser energy on those lesser challenging tasks. So it's really all about prioritizing front end. So first thing in the morning, first thing in the day, I have all this energy. When am I going to most effectively spend it so that as I cruise through my day, some of my last tasks will be less involved, less challenging, and I'll be able to kind of cruise out of my work without kind of backloading all the hard work at the end of the day when one, you're probably tired and or exhausted and you're just lacking energy or you're just burnt out for the day. So it is really important. Eat that frog first. As gross and as uncomfortable as it might be, once you get it out of the way, everything else just seems that much easier. So jumping into this next strategy, this is all about time management. And so this is actually pulled from the time management matrix, is actually also known as the Eisenhower matrix. And it was actually originally developed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And it was popularized by Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So the thing to note here is that quadrant 1, it's a quadrant of necessity. It's firefighting, right? So we often get caught in Q1 becoming consumed with firefighting and crisis management instead of crisis prevention. So it's all about those unresolved, those emails that keep coming in again and again and again, right? So again, looking at this as it's highly important and highly urgent. So that's when we zoom out again, that's what we're dividing this quadrant into. It's based on level of importance and level of urgency. And then when we jump down to quadrant 3, this is ultimately you're being lied to. So the urgency of these tasks come from other individuals' priorities and needs. So it's really important to assess the level of personal importance of a task to differentiate between Q1 and Q3. When we move over to quadrant 4, this is full of time wasters, right? Mindless TV, web surfing, chatting, gossip sites, right? Excessive gaming, idling, ultimately any time wasting activities. And so we spend time in Q4 because we have nothing better to do or we are procrastinating. And so procrastinating can again be a sign of low motivation, low mood, right? So it's important to recognize when you're in Q4 and why you're potentially feeling that way and wanting to avoid whatever it is that you are avoiding. And so that moves us roundabout way into Q2. So this is the most important quadrant. We neglect Q2 because the tasks don't become urgent until it's too late. And the tasks require greater investment of time and energy. And ultimately, Q2 is also tasks that you're not going to get immediate feedback. And that can be challenging because that brings a concept of what we call delay of gratification. So we like immediate gratification in our feedback because it helps our brain recognize what's important and what's going to give us rewards in our environment. Q2 activities, in a lot of ways, they push out that reward into the longer, medium and long term, which again can be hard to invest because we don't know what we're going to get back, or there's still a level of uncertainty as to what the reward will be for that. So again, but it's really, really important. That's where you want to be spending your majority of your time. So a simple and effective use of the time management matrix Think about Q1 as manage. You want to manage it, but you don't want to be consumed by it. Q3 is delegate. Push and give off those tasks wherever you can, right? Q4 is dump. Get rid of it. Let it go. And Q2 is all about focus. That's where your energy should go. All right. So as we move along, we're going to talk about a third technique known as the Pomodoro Technique. So for anyone who has potentially heard of this technique, it got its name from the developer who used a tomato-shaped timer, a Pomodoro. So what we see in the Pomodoro technique is when faced with any large task or series of tasks, break the work down into short timed intervals that are spaced out by short breaks. So really, you're breaking it up typically into 25-minute chunks. And through this breaking up, you improve your focus training for your brain, and it can also improve attention span and concentration. So again, when we look at the strategy, it's choose a task to be accomplished. Set the Pomodoro to 25 minutes. Work on the task until the Pomodoro rings. Then put a check on your sheet of paper. So this is really important. You need to have tangible outcomes and rewards for completion of the task. So if you just go, oh, I completed the task in your mind, that's hard for your brain to recognize that that was an achievement and that feels good. It's cross it off the list, throw the piece of paper out the window, burn it, whatever you got to do, signal to your brain that you completed the task in a very tangible way. Then take a short break. So 5 minutes is typically okay, right? Reset, recharge, get set up for that next task. And at the end of the day, every 4 Pomodoros, take a longer break. So again, allowing your brain to fully recuperate, recenter, and then move forward. So as we move along here, as we come to the end of our presentation today, we're going to talk briefly about the whole of supporting productivity. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of ideas to consider. And so some things you might want to integrate is, for instance, starting meetings with check-ins. How are you doing? Make it personal, right? What's one word that you can describe or characterize how COVID has affected your work life? So it's not just jumping into work immediately. It's personalizing and connecting with people on an intimate and personal level wherever you can and wherever is appropriate. So a second idea is identify motivators, right? We all have individual motivators. And so when we work as a team, it's really important to talk about those motivators and talk about where they may be different and where they may be the same. Because where they're the same, then individuals can align and work towards a common goal with common energy, right? And so collaborate, leverage collective mental resources. We are all carrying an Atlas stone in the midst of this pandemic. So we all have a little bit of our energy and attention pulled away from whatever task, whatever work we're engaged in. So we need to leverage our comrades, our colleagues, and help and use everyone's mental resources to solve problems together so that we get to spread out that energy expenditure. So we want to keep meetings on track. Consider being even more disciplined around agendas and meeting process rules, right? Consider shorter meetings to keep participants laser focused on tasks at hand and reduce video meeting fatigue. So again, short and punchy meetings, right? Know what you're talking about, get through the agenda, and then exit the meeting. Don't have it drag on, because again, people are having to engage and spend energy, and that can be really, really challenging if that's happening consistently and when those meetings kind of go off track. So go for a walking meeting for idea generation and creative types of meetings, right? This is really, really important, and obviously through the physical distancing approach currently. And then finally, it's really, really important to take short breaks and take breaks where you can, right? Because we all can't you can't drive a car at 100 miles an hour indefinitely. You need to stop, you need to refuel, and that's the same as us. We need to stop, refuel, recharge, and it's okay. Because our bodies, again, especially in this highly sedentary situation that we're all existing in currently, it's important to be mobile and break from technology as well. because we're obviously going to experience some fatigue around that. And finally, reach out for support. Reach out for support to individuals like myself and my colleague Nina at counseling centers, whether it's private practice or through the government. There are absolutely resources, and we're totally here to help. And then ultimately, another thing too is that we also offer assessments through synthesis psychology, where we can assess individuals' motivations. So you can identify what ultimately motivates you and what demotivates you, and that can potentially help you redefine and reshape your work environment, your life environment, to best support and align you with your motivators. All right, so as we come to the end here, I want to pose one final question, which I invite everyone to put their responses into the chat. What is one action step you plan to take to support mood and motivation in your work life? So again, please put your responses in the chat. And I will pass it over to Nina quickly as we close up.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And thank you all. I mean, part of why we wanted to, like we were talking about, give you a range of strategies and quite a range of information to have access to is because, like Aaron was mentioning, different things motivate different people, and different things work for different people. I mean, some people have been told, you know, why don't you like make sure you write lists, and for some people that's a spectacular strategy, especially if they do it really strategically. And then other people, it's like, it's the last thing they want to do. It's the last thing that works for them. And so having a range of things to be able to select from goes a long way. And also when people are tired, it's just helpful to have a menu of options. And you'd be like, okay, this or this, and being able to pull from some of these very many pieces of information to be able to say, okay, so based on what I'm seeing here, you know what, finding out what people's motivators are could be really useful. If you have a sense of what they are, if you're working on strategies for yourself, then you could say, you know what, these kinds of things I think right now would be very, very helpful to me. I mean, given that a lot of you identified savoring as something that you want to increase, that could be a place to start, and looking at what are ways to put together some acknowledgements of, let's say, things that have been going well, and situations that you want to support to have happen going forward. And given that I understand that a lot of people who are in attendance do work within the human resource space, and within those types of roles, we know that you're needing to have a range of types of supports to be able to extend to your teams, to your organizations, because you know that one approach isn't necessarily going to meet everybody's needs, and one type of approach isn't necessarily also going to fit in every situation. So if you've got some ideas today that will help to support motivation, mood, and being able to get things done in your organization, well, then that's great. That certainly has been our intention in terms of providing all this information. So I'm curious about what might be some of the strategies that people entered into the chat.
So our audience has been actively participating. Some of the answers are, well, to set up a June project for one, and then more physical activity, more connection with peers and colleagues, breaking down bigger tasks and taking it one step at a time, 30 minutes of meditation a day, more activity throughout the workday to offset sedentary work, taking the time to be grateful for the things that went well in the day, and then trying out gratitude journaling and working on diet, exercise, and other direct physical health related things. And then there's a comment that this member really appreciate the very hands-on tools you have presented today and great techniques, and I will try the listing of my day tasks and arrange them in order.
Awesome. That's wonderful. So one thing I want to comment on is there was breaking big tasks into small chunks. I think that's great. And so an analogy to keep in mind that I plant the seed with lots of my clients is the question, how do you eat an elephant? So ultimately there are a lot of things that we have to shoulder these days. It can seem like this giant elephant in the room, but ultimately you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So again, breaking those tasks down I think is fantastic, and you will get through it, and ultimately baby steps are still steps forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a strategy that comes to my mind that fits so nicely with Aaron's Pomodoro description is that when we're getting something done, like so working on something, okay, so sometimes like Aaron was talking about setting the timer, and then what you do during those mini breaks, sometimes it can be a rest break, sometimes it can be an active break. So a lot of people identified having more activity. So because like it can be 4 minutes worth of squats. I don't know about you, but I find 4 minutes worth of squats like quite a lot of squats, and it can have an impact. And if you do that often enough, it adds up. Or jumping jacks, or stretch breaks, and it does get the circulation going. The connectivity will definitely help with being able to have more of a boost when coming back to the next work chunk. And if you split things up into those reasonable sized, like 20-25 minute pieces, a lot can get done. And definitely there's some tasks that are going to require more focused attention. There's some that you'll need to take a break earlier than 20-25 minutes. But by weaving some of those strategies together too, you can get pretty efficient at getting a lot of needs met, and supporting mood, focus, well-being, and productivity all at the same time.
Thank you so much for these valuable advices, and I wanted to thank our audience for being so active. We've received a lot of feedback that we'll convey afterwards to our speakers. So immediately, if you don't mind, we'll move on to the Q&A session. But before we do, we received a comment related to the time management matrix, and I thought I would give you an opportunity to discuss it or bring any clarifications you have.
Sure.
One of our attendees disagrees that Q4 needs to be dumped. Restoration, relaxation, meditation, and intentional idling is critical. Do you have any feedback to this comment?
I completely agree. If that is what your Q4 is filled with, keep it, right? But we have to be cautious that it's intentional engagement, intentional idling, right? Unintentional. So scrolling through social media, I would argue that needs to be let go, because that may not be as restorative as meditation, stretching, whatever it is, right? That is going to reset your body and your mind. But yes, if you can refine that Q4 into something that is healthy and restorative in nature and really focused on maintaining good physical and mental and emotional health, then yeah, totally keep it. Or Nina, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I was thinking, especially absolutely having rest, and the fact that I know that Aaron is a huge proponent of meditating, and yoga, and I don't know if you can see the wristbands he's got on. So he's definitely a fan of meditation, and encourages clients and works with clients to ensure that they're using these kinds of very intentional practices. So definitely having times to unplug are useful, and also being very intentional in terms of how we restore ourselves. But like Aaron was mentioning, there are some times, and I know I certainly experience them occasionally, where I'm thinking, wow, I decided to take a break, and that kind of got away on me. And I know the difference, and I'm sure we all do, where there are times when doing something to look after ourselves, it's just noteworthy, when things start to get into that less conscious type of restoration. So yeah, we really appreciate bringing up that point, because there is a significant and important distinction between how we restore ourselves.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we'll start with our first question. So, can you give examples of work activities that employers can implement in their team's work life to promote gratitude, savoring, kindness, and/or optimism?
Mm-hmm. Erin, do you want to talk about some of your gratitude strategies?
Sure. Okay, so there's a few strategies that we figured we didn't have enough time to talk about in this session. So I'm glad this actually came up because we get to talk a bit about it now. So there's a few instances where, particularly around gratitude, because I think gratitude is a fundamental, foundational state and emotion that really promotes positive well-being and health. So some of the things you can do is obviously gratitude journaling. So when we hear the word journaling, we're like, oh, I got to write pages and pages and pages. No, simplify. 3 things. What am I grateful for at work? What am I grateful for at home? Whatever it is, whatever setting you're in, focus on that. 3 things. Also, you can go for a gratitude walk. So really, that's all about going for a walk and appreciating your surroundings. So the gratitude walk is actually bridging kind of reflections on what you're happy and grateful for, but also it integrates mindfulness. So it asks you to also pay attention to and engage what your five senses are ultimately engaging in your environment, right? So what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're smelling, and what you're touching, right? And appreciate what you experience. Another thing too is a gratitude letter. So this is all about writing a letter to someone you appreciate and expressing in vivid detail how they have positively impacted you and why you appreciate them. So again, it's all about being vivid because you really want to paint that picture and create that sense of internal gratitude and then express that, because then you get to carry that gratitude forward and it basically cycles through your psyche and your body, which is again a very positive thing. And then finally, a gratitude reflection. So this is looking back and looking forward. So what we're seeing here is looking back on your previous accomplishments, what you've overcome, what you've garnered, what you've achieved, right? And then also looking forward to your goals in the future, right? And being excited and energized and grateful for having set those goals and really being able to dive into them as the future unfolds. Nina, any thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of those can be applied in work settings and then also in our personal lives. Like a gratitude walk in a more traditional way. I mean, this is where an extension, well, I mean, it's easier to apply in some ways for our own selves. I mean, it can certainly be encouraged for employees, but even doing walks where there's an appreciation of, let's say, like appreciating the opportunity to and acknowledging and sharing, like let's say the space that people are in. If people are like able to, I know we've done this sometimes, like say some people are diving into a particular kind of meeting while they're on their deck and people are appreciating the beautiful day outside, and then everybody's commenting on, you know, let's say what they see in someone's garden. And so there can be ways of, you know, using some of these strategies in combination where you can get creative with how you integrate this while people are working remotely, and then also bringing these into, let's say, a work setting, and certainly gratitude letters. I mean, getting to do like the shout outs, acknowledging, and if it's at all possible, of course, acknowledging the rock stars, of course, acknowledging the people who have like golden stars on their halo for everything that they're doing, and exceptional efforts, but also acknowledging, if it's possible, acknowledging everybody for something that they're contributing. And this doesn't mean, you know, you gloss over if there are significant performance challenges or something like that, but everybody could use acknowledgement in some way. Now, some people want it public and some people really don't, but no matter how that's expressed, if there's a way to acknowledge as much as is possible the effort that people are putting in, it does go a long way. And especially in, you know, in that really practical kind of way, highlighting specific examples of things.
Perfect, thank you. And I'll just take another maybe couple of minutes to ask this question. So what is a technique that our audience can practice if they're having a difficult time sleeping? Do you have any suggestions?
Okay, so I'm going to jump into this. I have a bit of training in sleep, and I actually really love supporting clients to get better sleep because that is one of the most foundational things that can really support good mood management, good mental health. So, quick version of some things to pay attention to. So, the first thing is first is go to sleep, go to bed only when you're sleepy, not when it's like scheduled, when you're sleepy, right? And sometimes that can be slightly varied or greatly varied. But for the root cause, go to bed only when you're sleepy, right? And then just to kind of counter that, but at the same time, try to go to bed consistently around the same time. So when you start to figure out when you get sleepy consistently, plan your bedtime around that and wake up at the same time, right? And so one of the other things too is don't exert sleep effort. So what that means is if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't fall back to sleep or you're struggling to fall asleep first thing, the moment you say, I need to sleep, or you get frustrated, get out of bed. Get out of bed, go to a nest, go to somewhere else in your place, whether it's a chair in the bedroom or on the couch in the living room, and practice and get back into a state of being sleepy again. So whether that's through reading, meditation, deep breathing, staring at and counting the stippling on the ceiling, whatever it is, just really getting yourself back into that state of calm peace and then returning to the bedroom to sleep. And one final thing to consider is reduce what else you do in your bed, right? At the end of the day, your bed should only be for sleep and sex, and that's it, right? Don't watch TV, don't be on your phone, right? Keep it really, really fundamental because that helps increase the strength of the relationship and the connection between the bed and your brain's recognition that that's where you sleep.
I'll just wrap it up by thanking you immensely, Nina and Aaron, for delivering this compelling and extremely helpful workshop. I think it's everybody's opinion. I've received so many comments about how helpful that was and all the tools and the advices you have presented. So thank you immensely for shedding some light on ways to uplift our mood and keep ourselves motivated while working remotely. I hope our participants have learned some practices to leverage mental health and productivity, as well as achieve and promote wellness and resilience in themselves. We would also like to thank our audience for your participation, especially during these difficult times. Stay safe, everybody, and take care of yourselves. Please visit our website for more upcoming webinars at workwellnessinstitute.org and register for free. All of our live webinars are accessible to the public. Thank you again for your participation, and thank you immensely, Nina and Aaron. Thank you again.
Thank you.